Welcome. My name is Penelope Chatterton. Welcome to Awaken the Dream. My friends, I have a new friend today. Her name is Ingrid Peschke. She is from Boston. She is a Christian Science practitioner, and I am excited to meet her and to hear about the life of Mary Baker Eddy after I hear a little bit about your life. So, why Christian Science, and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Why Christian Science? Well, just a little bit about myself.
Yeah.
I was raised as a Christian Scientist.
That helps.
It does. So both my parents were Christian Scientists, and we were brought to the Christian Science Sunday School, my brother and I, when we were young.
Okay.
And, you know, stuck with it. I just really loved the teachings.
Yeah.
I loved what I was learning.
Yeah.
And, you know, I saw how practical it was in my life as a daily practice.
Okay.
I saw healings in my life. I learned to love God and understand a little bit about my relationship to God. And that was what I was mostly interested in building on.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I didn't have moments where I questioned it and wondered about it, but it really became a foundation, a pillar for me in my life.
Did you ever think you'd be a practitioner at that, or was that a later decision when you realized you loved it that much?
You know, I think I always wanted to be a healer.
Yeah.
There was a time when I even thought, wow, I'd love to be a nurse, and then I really thought about that. That didn't quite jive entirely
Didn't like blood.
with my faith, but I love the idea of bringing people healing to people, and so I think in some ways, yes, I at some point always thought I would eventually become a practitioner, Christian Science practitioner. Yeah.
Are your parents very proud and excited about what you are and what you do? Are they pleased?
I mean, I hope so. My mom is not with us anymore.
Oh, okay.
Lovely woman, and I think they are. Yeah.
And your children are enjoying the church?
My children are, yes. And you know, I have one going off to college in the fall, and another one. I have now 3 teenagers. One just became a teenager, so I can officially say that they are. I have a house full of teens.
Well, let's talk about Mary Baker Eddy, because she was life-changing in the church.
Yeah.
And I don't know her history very well, so that's why I'm so delighted to have you help us with it.
Yeah.
Can you go way back with her as to why it happened?
Sure. Well, Mary Baker Eddy, you know, is a huge figure in the church, but certainly also, as you probably know, in the world, just in the history of women, of religion, and people who have sort of changed the course of history in terms of thought, metaphysics, spirituality. So she was a New Hampshire born, she was born in Bow and raised, and eventually made her way to Boston. So she's a New England woman, born in 1821.
1821.
Yeah, and always thought she'd become an author, a writer, despite some of the things that would prevent women, and especially in her day, of doing anything with their life aside from being a mother and having children, being a wife.
Yeah.
Which she did, but she had a lot of disappointments in her life as well, and she faced innumerable adversities. I have a lot of respect for her, for what she faced and for what she was able to accomplish in her life.
Yeah. Did she have trauma in her life?
I mean, I would say so, definitely. One of the most traumatic things that happened to her was she married her love at a young age, George Glover, and they went off to his work in South Carolina, left her home. Immediately she found herself a child, and they were expecting, and then he passed on suddenly.
Wow.
So here she was, you know, a new wife and mother,
that is
actually
tough.
just expecting, hadn't even had the child yet, and
he
he passed
died
on of yellow fever.
Oh my gosh.
And it was devastating for her, absolutely devastating. She made her way back to, as you know, women in those days, if you don't have a husband to support you, you go back home. So she had this sort of wild, rambunctious young boy, and was hard for her to care for him. Eventually, her ill health and other circumstances led her to have to give him up.
She did?
She did.
Oh, no.
And so when he was 11, he actually was taken away from her to an entirely different state. And it was just very hard.
Oh.
So
were they allowed to be in touch?
It was a family friend who had been a nurse in her home, and she and her husband took them off to the Dakotas.
Okay.
And you know, they were in touch through letters and things, but they lost touch.
Yeah.
Eventually he was in the Civil War, and there was a long period of time before she saw him
The
again.
Civil War.
Can you believe that?
No.
So she went through that, and she was married again. She had a second marriage to a traveling dentist named Daniel Patterson.
Okay, a traveling dentist.
A traveling dentist. He worked on her teeth and eventually worked on her heart.
That's cute.
I think at one point she was sure, and her father was sure, that he was not the man to marry. But she did, and he promised that he would adopt her son and they could have him in their home. But he did not make good on his promise.
Oh no.
So she was with him for, you know, over 10 years and eventually parted ways. He was not faithful. So I think when you say trauma, there were things that were very hard. Eventually her son, when she finally heard from him again, a letter saying he was in the Civil War. Now, can you imagine as a mother, you haven't seen your son, and now he's in one of the worst wars, and eventually, you know, he was wounded almost fatally.
Oh my goodness.
I think it was a wound to his neck. So they exchanged letters. She was praying for him, for his recovery, and he did recover. He was a very hardy boy.
Wonderful. Good stock.
Yeah, good stock. And, you know, I think she valued education. She valued being learned, and you know, certainly girls in those days didn't have as many opportunities.
She studied a lot, didn't she?
She did.
Yeah.
Her favorite brother Albert, really helped her a lot in that regard. Gave her books, talked to her. She had a wonderful vocabulary. She actually opened her own schoolhouse at one point. And her brother was a lawyer and worked in D.C. and actually was good friends with Franklin Pierce, who was our president.
My gosh.
And he was on his way to the presidency as well, and then she lost him as well. So I think, you know, hardships.
Yeah. Loss will do the trick.
Loss does the trick.
Yeah. Send you within.
But with the lowest of lows, I would say her high was her deep reverence for God and prayer. And I think as a New England household, her home, she was brought up with the Bible like most people, and reading from the Bible, learning about it, and just, I think, finding it to be a practical resource for her troubles.
Yeah. Was she well at this point? Was she?
She was, you know, probably, I wouldn't say a very healthy through many periods of her life. I think especially during this time when she was married to Daniel Patterson, she had quite a few just periods of invalidism. And I think, you know, when I've read about her life, sometimes I feel like it had to do with some of those heartaches.
Sure.
Just really maybe feeling like, you know, she lost her first husband and her son, and I think it was hard for her.
So, well, that's got to be depressing, to say the least, and that sends you into feeling not so hot. And
exactly.
Yeah, you know, you mirror your insides, and so she had a rough life.
She had a tough time, and I think, you know, but during this time, there was quite a movement towards alternative therapies. One of them was homeopathy. And she investigated that. She investigated various things because she wasn't finding healing through sort of the common systems of her day. So she did do a lot of poking around into other things to try and find a sense of well-being.
A seeker.
A seeker.
All right.
So
she's on a roll, seeking.
She's on a roll, and you know, during this time, she had what's called maybe a pivotal moment in her life where she was on her way to a temperance meeting. Her husband, Daniel Patterson, was away. Again, he traveled a lot. And so, interestingly, you know about the temperance movement.
Yes.
And it was very, very big in her day. I think in some ways changed the course of our country in terms of alcoholism, or people who drank. They were walking there, and it was an icy New England evening, and she fell on the ice. And her injuries were so great that they couldn't bring her to her home. So they brought her to a neighbor's home and called a doctor.
That bad? It was that bad?
Yeah. And then when they found out that she was probably going to die of internal injuries, they called her husband to come home, and they called the local pastor. And so it was dire. She had friends and family in the other room kind of waiting for her. They transferred her eventually to her home, and she asked for her Bible.
Yeah.
And it was during that moment of really reaching out to God, which she was accustomed to doing, that she read a healing in the Bible of one of Jesus's healings. And was just, I think, struck by the life behind the healing.
Yeah, she was ready to get that message. It sounds like.
I think she was. You know, kind of these many years had prepared her.
Yeah.
And during that moment, while I could never explain what happened entirely, no one can, but she herself really, and she's not here to share that with us, but I think she glimpsed something of the deeply spiritual nature of these healings. Yeah. That they weren't just for his time period, but for all of us to sort of understand and practice ourselves. Yeah. And you know, when she recognized herself again after this moment of prayer, she felt warm. Her body wasn't cold anymore, and the symptoms were gone. And she surprised everyone when she walked in the other room and said, "Hi," and you know, whatever she said. Wow. But they were a little bit, wow, whoa, what happened? And I think she was too.
That's life-changing.
It was life-changing. She didn't really know what had happened. She knew she was healed, but she didn't know how it happened.
Yeah. So I'll bet she was eager to find out.
She was. And you know, subsequently her husband came home, and then eventually they separated. He ran off with another woman, and interestingly, she actually helped this woman at some point get back with her husband, who was prominent in the town, and she forgave her and really practiced her Christian behavior. It was kind of hard to believe.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Good for her. You go.
I mean, so, and then she spent the next many years of her life studying the Bible and writing copious notes to really try and get at the heart of what this was.
Yeah. That's a good process.
It's quite an introspective process. It's a quiet process, but it also became an open process.
Was she sort of reinterpreting it at that point? Was she taking scripture and then starting to put a slant on it that made more sense to her?
Yeah, I think she took a lot of notes on Genesis. It became one of the first chapters that she used in her class instruction, which she ended up helping others learn how to heal as well. Wow. And she was healing others naturally. People in the town heard about this woman who could heal, and they would bring people to her. And you know, I think that spread, the word spread. Yeah. And at one point, she healed a woman of pneumonia, and this woman was on her deathbed, and her doctor was there, and he turned to Mary Baker Eddy and he said, "You know, my medicines didn't heal this woman, but you have. Now, it would be wrong if you didn't write this in a book." He said, "Some people need to know about this."
Good for him.
And yeah, so she went home that night and opened her Bible, as she was accustomed to doing, opened it to a passage that said, "Go and write it in a book."
Oh, perfect.
So she felt like she had her message, you know, do this. And so it was really quite a number of years.
I was going to say, did that take just years and years for her to accomplish it?
Yeah, I mean, 1866 was The Fall on the Ice. Okay. And her book, Science and Health, with Key to the Scriptures, which came out of this process, was published first in 1875. Wow. So it was a number of years of also moving from boarding house to boarding house. She didn't have a husband to support her. Yeah. She was really living off of her healing and teaching and writing. Yeah. She was actually a published author at that time. She'd published in the Ladies' Home Journal.
She was given a mission, boy.
She was. Yeah. So I think she felt this growing kind of momentum. Yeah. But it wasn't always an easy path.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. Did she feel, and I don't know if any of us can know, I mean, the folks that came to her were just really open and ready and accepting, because that's all part of the deal. I mean, you come ready.
It is.
Yeah, and not without issues. I mean, you don't come with issues. You come ready. You come open.
Yeah.
And so
I think what makes you open occasionally is adversity, right?
Of course.
So if
Yeah.
whether it's illness or whatever it may be, I think she had husbands coming to her for their wives, and
Yeah.
you know, people coming to her for their children or
Yeah.
loved ones.
Yeah.
Even her own family members, she healed of some very serious things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, yes, there's an openness.
She knew who she was. She knew her wholeness
Yeah.
and her health. She knew all of that. She found that.
She did, and
She sunk into it almost, I would say.
she did. And you know, I think one of the things she said just a few years before she passed, and she was 89 when she passed on, the biggest, she said, you know, my work, all my tears, all my efforts have not just been for my devoted followers, but for all of humanity.
Ooh.
So she didn't exclude it to those who just said they were Christian Scientists.
Did she know at her death how big her movement was?
I think she did. And she was really
I mean, was it a church
humble.
by then? Was it
Yes.
called a church?
Yes.
Okay.
I think at some point she felt that the churches of her day would just latch on to this idea, read her book and utilize it within the system of
Yeah.
their own religion.
Sure.
And that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Now you can imagine this was a time period where women didn't work, let alone preach from a pulpit.
Or anyone would listen to
Right.
them.
But here she was with ideas.
Yeah.
She was there to, you know,
How dare
change the
she?
world. So she had, you know, men who were pastors and saying, who is this woman? And I think some men who said, wow, let me find out about this. So there
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a variety. But she, in her lifetime, I would say the biggest chunk of, you know, her career happened between the age of 60 and 90. Now, can you believe that?
Wow.
30 years of her life, when most, you know, I think that the life expectancy for women in the 1800s
Yeah.
was 65, maybe the most.
That's going some. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, but yet she started it, you know, rearing to go around
She
50s
was
and then
so
ended at
alive.
89. Something in that period of time
Yeah.
that she really didn't stop.
She was on fire.
She was.
Yeah.
She wrote, I
So
think,
it was a
17
church.
books.
It was a church. It was a Christian Science church.
So she started her church eventually
Okay.
and called it the First Church of Christ Scientists.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's, you've probably seen the
Yeah.
building in
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah. I've been in it.
You've been in it.
I have
there
been in
you
it.
go. Well, so have you been in there's a sort of a modest one with the limestone exterior.
I think I've been in a small.
You've been in the small one
Yeah.
with the stained glass windows.
Yes.
That was the first church.
Oh my goodness.
And then the extension with the large dome, that was added later.
Yeah.
And that's what has become famous with its large dome and the sort of,
So folks gathered with her.
yes.
Okay.
It did.
Did it spread beyond? I'm seeing one church with her.
Yeah.
I mean, did it just keep spreading in her day before she passed?
It did. It went quickly to England and then to
did.
Germany.
Ah.
And really now it's a worldwide religion. It's
Yeah.
all over the world.
Yeah.
But she was aware of that.
Yeah.
She lectured all over.
Yeah.
I think she went as far as Chicago
That's why
and
she
Washington,
lived so long.
D.C.
She had things to do.
She had things to do. She wasn't thinking about, you know. So she established a church manual for her church, a system of government, which was quite inspired. It's very democratic. We don't have a personal pastor.
That's right.
Yeah.
You have readers.
We have readers.
I love that.
Yeah. They're
Right.
elected by the church members.
So one reads the Bible and the other one reads another Mary Baker Eddy's
Science and Health.
Science and Health.
Which is really meant to open up the Bible and
Yeah.
explain it.
Explain it.
They're partners. You
Yeah.
know? I actually am the second reader in my branch church.
Are
So
you?
I get to read from the Bible on Sundays.
Oh, nice.
And it's just been a lovely experience.
Yeah.
But at the time of her passing, she was actually one of the most famous women in the United States, if not the world, and one of the wealthiest.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So she really went from, you know, kind of almost abject poverty.
Yeah.
As a single woman, you know,
She
a
was-
widowed woman.
God
and then
was using her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, those things didn't matter to her.
I'll bet they didn't.
That wasn't the point of her life. So I think in some ways she wanted to downplay that. She didn't.
Were there offshoots from Christian Science during her day, like Church of Religious Science or Unity? Did these come up because spiritual healing began to surface?
It did.
With
yeah.
other.
Yeah. I think there probably were, and she was careful to help people to understand that Christian Science was its own distinct system of religion. And I think she was aware that there were those who would try and plagiarize her writing and her ideas. And
because they worked.
Because, and I think too, she was also aware of the fact that she had to be clear about it, especially as a woman, to be able to say, this was written by Mary Baker Eddy, not someone else. And it's important. Just like any author today would protect their works.
I'm glad she was a woman.
I am too. I am too. And one of the things I love about it, and this is not unique to Christian Science, I think other religions think of God this way too, but one of the things I've always loved is that, she refers to God as Father and Mother.
That's right. She does.
Yeah.
Father, Mother, God.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
I believe the Quakers or the Shakers, at least the Quakers do as well. And I suspect many people think of God as a loving God, as a God that has both sort of typical feminine and masculine qualities of, caring. And
now it's very spread all over the world.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Mm-hmm. And is it hard to become a member?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What do you mean?
Well, how do you do that? Is there anything they
prerequisites or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to pass a test.
Well, there's no test. There is no test. In other words, you don't go into an examination room or something like that. As for being perfectly pious, I don't think anyone can claim that.
No.
I really think it comes down to there's a membership process to become a member of the
you got the reader
Mother Church, the first church of Christ Scientists in Boston. There's a process to become a member of that international worldwide movement, which is kind of cool.
Oh.
So you can become a member of that and then also be a member of your local branch church, or if you don't have a local branch church, of something close by or whatever. And so each branch church comes up with their own system of sort of acknowledging whether an individual is ready to espouse those beliefs and be a part of this organized.
Are there certain beliefs you can tell us about that are specific, like taking care of yourself? Do you have anything about no drinking or stuff like that?
Right.
What are the rules?
I think you would find that there's nothing specifically written out like you must not drink, you must not smoke, you must not da-da-da.
Yeah.
But I would say that in general, if you were to meet a Christian Scientist, they wouldn't drink, they wouldn't smoke or take drugs or kind of have any of those extreme uses that would tend to draw them away from a spiritually centered life, from a life of searching for their God-centered identity.
What about with spiritual healing? What if you go to doctors? Does that matter?
In Christian Science?
Yes. Does it matter? I mean, is there anything specific there, or does it matter?
I think that's one of the big misnomers in terms of understanding Christian Science, because for each member, for each individual, I would say, who has decided that they want to study and practice Christian Science, it's really up to them.
Okay,
it's up to them in their individual practice. So the church never mandates how an individual would practice their health.
There's no judgment.
No.
We have 4 minutes, by the way, just to let you know how fast this goes.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
So I think the idea is that based on your own individual practice, I, for myself, know that, I just make decisions that are based on results. What I've seen to be true and practical in my life. I know that I have choices and I can make those choices.
And you would feel an inner guidance.
Absolutely.
To any decisions you would make. And if you broke a bone, you'd make you'd make a decision.
Absolutely. I've had healings of a broken foot.
Yay.
Without any medical intervention. I also had a cast on my arm when I broke my arm when I was younger. And then it came off very quickly.
Ah, how exciting.
So I think sometimes, you just make the right decision based on that scenario. I couldn't tell you exactly how I would do it. But I think if you talk to a group of Christian Scientists, you would probably find that they would say, my first choice is spiritual healing as taught in Christian Science.
It's in our last, because we're running out of time, it's the knowledge of your wholeness and your complete health and the perfection of you as a soul, as a body, as in everything. Everything works. Everything. You have the gift of life, and it's divine.
I think it's something that belongs to each one of us.
Yeah.
you know, we can claim our health in a way that maybe we hadn't thought of before. And the more you learn about God, about your life in relation to your spiritual nature, boy, it just opens up
and you
ways
get deeper
of thinking that you hadn't thought of before.
In your practice, you just get deeper. And as you get deeper, then you're more open, and miracles happen and healings happen, and you're on a journey.
And I think the mental component of health is becoming much more recognized even among medical practitioners today.
Absolutely.
Than ever before.
You can go to a big hospital in Boston and they'll give you the holistic team.
Yeah.
You know, they do, and it's refreshing.
It is. So it's nice to see thought moving.
Thought is moving. So you're dedicated, you're a reader. Is it hard to become a reader?
Well, you're elected by the church members.
You got to vote.
Got to vote. It's for my church, it's a 3-year commitment.
Oh, nice.
And so I just started in February, and and I'm loving it. It's wonderful.
And and every week you go, there's a certain reading that is on the docket waiting for you to
there's
do.
A subject that has the same citations and the same lesson that would be read all over the world in every Christian Science church.
That's what
so as a reader, I'm not putting my spin on it. I'm not talking. I'm just reading this lesson with my fellow reader.
Now, do you read the Bible or do you read the interpretation? Do you switch off, or?
I read the Bible.
You read the Bible.
I do.
And then your pal.
Yes. He reads from Science and Health.
Science and Health.
Yeah.
And you sing?
We sing a lot. We have 3 hymns, and we have a solo, and we have an organ prelude and postlude, and there's a lot of music. A lot of joy comes from that, I think.
Yeah.
Last week the solo was so beautiful. I just thought, how do you read after that? I just wanted to get up and hug the soloist. It was so gorgeous.
Yeah, music really moves.
It really
moves the soul.
Yeah.
Well, I love the fact that you came out here to tell us about Mary Baker Eddy, and we want to hear more next week about Christian Science today, because I'm sure, like many churches, they're changing, and new perspectives and new openness. Consciousness is growing.
It is.
And so we're moving right along with it.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Ingrid Peschke.
Yes.
I said it right. Thank you, my friends, for joining us on Awaken the Dream. We will talk to you again soon.